think I've been through too many of these. Electronic health records are now standard in every health system, virtually every health system in the nation. And every one of them have made mistakes. And in most every systems, the first effort failed. But we have more than enough models in place so that this should not have happened. But it did. My real issue is a couple of, who was the contractor? I was looking through the report and never a name of the contractor.
Sir, there were numerous contractors that supported the IHIS effort.
Who are they?
Sir, I don't have a list of the contractors with me today, but we certainly can make that list available to you.
You know, somebody ought to be held accountable here. We're holding the Coast Guard accountable, but the contractor also screwed up. I want to know who screwed up. Who's the contractor that screwed up here? Mr. Pownda, do you know?
I can get you a list of the contractors who were involved in that.
I'm sorry. This whistling behind just wiped you out. Could you say that?
Yeah, we can get you a list of the contractors who were involved. I think you bring up a good point. You know, I've testified in front of Congress on many failed acquisitions over the years. And is there mismanagement on the government side? Yes, but there is also an obligation on the contractual side to work in partnership on this. And we need more of that going forward, clearly.
I'm just willing to bet without knowing who they are. I'll bet they've screwed up before. I'll bet we've hired the same folks that screwed up before to do another screw up. Yes, I would like to know the name of the companies that failed to perform. That's the first issue. The second issue was the question raised by the chairman, Mr. Hunter, and that is the Department of Defense is in the process of developing an electronic medical record, and if I recall correctly, they finally decided, out of a fit of wisdom, that it would also be the same records that the VA used. In other words, they were transferable one to another. That took about 10 years fight between the two agencies. But I guess somewhere along the line, both decided that an active member and reservist in the military, the Department of Defense, might at some time in the future become a veteran, and that their medical records really ought to be available to the Veterans Administration? Does the Coast Guard also see the wisdom of this transferability of the medical records from the Coast Guard to the VA? Are you taking that into account?
Absolutely, sir. And just to be clear, right now, even though we're on paper health records, we do transfer our paper health records to the VA. It's through a system called the Health Artifacts Imaging Management System, which is the same system DoD uses right now. We digitize our paper health records when a member leaves the service, and that record is uploaded into HAMES, and the VA can extract the record from HAMES.
Okay. So, at least you're thinking about it with regard to paper. And you're going to do that with regard to the electronics if and when you ever get there?
Absolutely, sir.
Or the chairman was pushing the point, I think correctly, that you ought to be using the same system as the Department of Defense. Are you contemplating doing that? It wasn't quite clear to me in the responses, admirals, that you are or are not.
The alternatives analysis has
please, really speak loud. This whistling behind is most distracting.
So the alternatives analysis that we conducted, that is one of the preferred alternatives, and we're working through the details to make that happen.
And when do you expect to make a decision?
We are approaching acquisition decision event 2A, 2B, which probably doesn't mean much to you, but we have a major acquisition decision coming up here probably end of February.
I know of several clinics in California that have more than 50,000 lives in their clinics. They've established electronic medical records. I mean, some of this stuff is now off the shelf. Mr. Pownda, you've been at this a long time. Mm-hmm. You've found more than enough problems. Your recommendations in your report are rather general. Do you have specific recommendations, and is one of those recommendations.
Yeah, I would say the key recommendation, and I've seen this, you could have the best project management on these technology projects, but if you don't have executives that are accountable and breathing down the neck of project managers, that's what makes this stuff work. When you get executives involved, I do like example, Census Bureau. Okay, now we're going to spend $3 billion more on the Census Bureau. What happens? Secretary Ross is now involved with the Census Bureau, and they set up adequate governance. The Coast Guard has a governance process in their policies. They just need to execute it. And starts with the admirals at this table, with the CIO, with the CFO, and they need to drive the delivery of this system. Good governance, that's what actually works in government, when you have the executives accountable and pushing hard to make sure we get deliveries, not only from the government, but from contractors too. You sit down with contractors, you demand the A-team. That's the stuff that's worked over the years, and I can give you positive examples too where it has worked.
I agree entirely. So, admirals, are you engaged?
Yes, Congressman. IHIS was a kind of a watershed event. It shook our foundations. It really caused us to kind of sit back on our heels and try to figure out what happened. IHIS did not have the appropriate executive oversight, and that is probably the biggest problem. There's other things that complicate IHIS, but they all lead to this failed oversight on our part. So we have stood up a formal acquisition program for EHRA, and it has the right executives providing the oversight. Admiral Schwartz is a member of the EOC, the Executive Oversight Committee. Our CIO is, and a host of others that have a stake in this. So I assure you, we have the right executives breathing down the neck.
Well, you just described everybody's responsible, and therefore nobody's responsible. So which of the two of you are responsible?
I am responsible because I'm the acquisition officer.
Admiral Schwartz?
Sir, I'm responsible for ensuring the requirements document is delivered to our acquisition officer to delineate what we need and what we want for an electronic health record system.
Isn't that readily available from a dozen different organizations that already have electronic medical records?
We have completed the operational requirements document. We delivered it to the hands of our chief acquisition officer, and we're moving as quickly as we can to get this EHR out in the field.
Have you consulted with Mr. Ponner on his recommendations?
Sir, we have read the GAO's draft report, and we have taken them absolutely to heart. As Admiral Haycock mentioned, governance was a significant issue with IHIS. IHIS was stovepiped in the medical program. We did not involve the chief information officer. We did not involve the chief acquisition officer. No more. As we move forward, we have this cross-directorate governance that includes the CIO, that includes the chief acquisition officer, and others on the governance board.
You've developed an AOA?
An alternatives analysis.
Yes. Have you developed one?
We have.
Have you presented that to the committee, us?
I don't.
Well, why don't you do so? We've seen AOAs on God knows how many things on the defense, on the House Armed Services Committee. I'd love to see your AOA. Mr. Pounder, have you reviewed the AOAs?
No, I have not reviewed that in great detail.
Should you?
Yes, but I would say you could eliminate the AOAs down to, this was mentioned here, this is a robust area when you look at commercial products. So I don't know why we would look at anything beyond commercial products, and then I'll narrow it further. That's piggyback on DOD and VA. Let's make it simple. We're making it too complicated. I understand we have to follow
Admiral
process.
Schwartz, you heard what he said?
Sir, as the Chief Medical Officer, I absolutely would love to go with DOD and the VA. I have provided my requirements. We worked very closely to look at what DOD was doing to ensure that the operational requirements document that we provided to the acquisition officer was very similar to what the DOD system is.
I find it astounding that, I mean, this is so, This is not complicated. There are commercial applications out there. I know 4 clinics that in the last 3 years have purchased off-the-shelf electronic medical records that also allow them the opportunity to convert their previous paper records to electronic records. All done. It's off the shelf. And they have more lives than the Coast Guard has. I guess one question is that the GAO comes in after there's a screw-up. It seems to me that there ought to be an iterative process here. Mr. Powner, you've got a lot more knowledge than either of the 2 admirals here about these kinds of things. This has been your life, or at least your more recent life's work. Maybe you ought to quit GAO and become a consultant. But stay where you are. We need you there. But it would seem to me that it would be worthwhile for the Coast Guard to consult with the GAO and to learn from their experiences. I know you have 2 different tasks.
Yeah, if I can add, so, you know, we do some postmortems at GAO on things that go wrong, but we do a lot of work for the Congress when acquisitions are in flight, and that's when it's most effective. Working alongside, we can still maintain our independence and work alongside while acquisitions are in flight to ensure that governance and project management, contractor oversight, and all those things are occurring.
Well, given that, I've just requested an AOA, or the AOA. I would appreciate your review of the AOA while it's in process. Postmortems are usually over dead and troubled projects. And we can avoid that, I think, by working together here. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. You know, one thing we looked at, and I don't know if you've heard of this, Mr. Powner, but it's called